Thank you, Todd. It's a privilege and a pleasure. Privilege and a pleasure to be here this morning. And the work that Madegowda and I will be presenting is something that a lot of us have been thinking about at ATREE, and it speaks directly to an ongoing larger debate in conservation in India right now. Okay, so in October of 2010, colleagues from the Biligiri Rangaswamy Temple Sanctuary, and I'm going to refer to it as BRT henceforth, they staged a silent protest in the streets of, through the streets of Chamarajnagar. They were protesting at the imminent upgradation, if you like, of BRT from a wildlife sanctuary to a tiger reserve, and what it meant in terms of relocation for them. Although approval for conversion to a tiger reserve came in 2010, what actually started this train of events was an event in 2005 with the disappearance of tigers from the Sariska Tiger Reserve in North India. And this has come to be known as the Sariska Tiger Crisis, because Sariska was a very high-profile tiger reserve located close to the capital city, where people would, visiting dignitaries used to be whisked off to see tigers. And so in the wake of this, the Prime Minister constituted the Tiger Task Force to look into tiger conservation and see how we could be doing this better. What the Tiger Task Force came up with, there were three broad kinds of recommendations. It recommended institutional reform, giving the Project Tiger Directorate greater powers and autonomy. It recommended strengthening protection where required, so in places where it was determined that the human presence was irreversibly damaging habitats or wildlife. It recommended immediate relocation and strengthening protection to be done in a time-bound manner, so people weren't left as trespassers in their own homes. And it also recommended what they called the coexistence agenda, or an Indian model of conservation, given the peculiar situation in India where over 3 million people are estimated to live in protected areas across the country. So a more inclusive kind of conservation. Okay, so in the aftermath of this report, within a couple of months, the National Tiger Conservation Authority was constituted. Soon after that was the 2006 amendment to the Wildlife Protection Act, which took tiger reserves and made them a legal category from what had previously been just a management category. And this mandated that tiger reserves needed to have a core and a buffer, and people had to be relocated from these core areas. But given India's peculiar situation, the fact that we worked very rapidly to implement the more exclusionary or protectionist recommendations from the Tiger Task Force, but to date have done very little about the more inclusive recommendations, raises questions about the impacts of proceeding along just this very exclusionary protectionist kind of conservation path. What are the socioeconomic and ecological impacts of this model of conservation? And are there ecological arguments to be made for an alternative or a complement to the current exclusionary model? The first question then, the story so far has not been that encouraging. Relocation has had a very poor track record, with the exception of maybe one or two instances. Relocation has repeatedly led to increasing destitution and poverty. It's increased hostility between communities and forest department. But even looking at the sort of more narrow metric of tiger numbers, Sariska was an extreme example, but the guns and guards sort of model of conservation has had mixed success. There are 2 or 3 tiger reserves where tiger numbers are closer to what people predict as potential tiger numbers, but most tiger reserves are not doing so well. So that brings us to the second question, whether there are ecological arguments to be made for an alternative or a complement to this model of conservation. And what we'll do this morning is draw on ATREE's work in the BRT to try and see whether we can convince you that there is a case for this. Okay, so BRT is, it gets its name from this large white cliff that dominates the landscape, the Biligiri, white rock. It also gets part of its name from the fact that the temple of Lord Rangaswamy is perched atop this cliff. Rangaswamy, legend has it, came and settled in these hills and married a Soliga woman and has become part of the area. The sanctuary, or now tiger reserve, is in southern India, in the state of Karnataka. Fairly average size protected area by Indian standards, and the large variation in elevation and rainfall leads to several different forest types within a fairly small area, from scrub forest and dry deciduous forest at lower elevations all the way up to montane cloud forest at upper elevations. The area has about 700 plus tree species and more than 30 species of mammals, including tigers, leopards, sloth bear, Indian bison, elephant, Hanuman langur, named the big mammals. The area has also been home to the Soliga tribal community, and currently it's estimated that over 12,000 Soligas live within the BRT in about 57 kodus or settlements. We have documented evidence that the Soligas have been here for about 300 years, but it's probably longer. And prior to 1974, when the area became a wildlife sanctuary, they used to practice shifting cultivation. They hunted, gathered NTFP from the forest, and also had their own system of fire management. We're learning that they had a fairly nuanced understanding of fire. They had different names for different types of fire and different winds associated with fire. Post 1974, shifting cultivation was banned, and they were settled in these kodus or settlements, given some land to cultivate. Hunting was stopped, NTFP collection continued, and fires were strictly suppressed. Then more recently, in 2006, NTFP collection has also been banned through an amendment of the Wildlife Protection Act, and people have been turning to cage labor. This created some tension with the forest part. In time, will probably cause the distancing of the younger generation from forest. Okay, so what we'll be talking about today is briefly work that several different people at ATREE have done over the years. I'll be touching on demography of Amla, which is one of the most important NTFP species that people depended on. I'll want to talk about lantana, camara, and fire. Lantana is an invasive species forest, and both the Soliga community and the forest department regard both fire and lantana as some of two of the biggest threats to this forest. And then Madegowda will talk about the countermapping exercise that he and others have done, and go on to talk about the Forest Rights Act, which creates opportunity for looking at conservation. Okay, moving on to first part then. Prior to the 2006 ban on NTFP collection, NTFP constituted about 60% of cash incomes for people living in the forest. And these are some of the most important NTFP. Moving on to Amla. Amla collectively refers to two species of Philanthus, Amlica and Indophyta, in two different forest types, the dry forest and the scrub forest. And the work I'm presenting was done by Tamara Tickton of the University of Hawaii, along with other ATREE colleagues, who looked at impact of multiple disturbances on Amla. So Amla populations have been declining in this area, and it's been attributed by the department to harvest, one of the ban. But they were able to look at harvest in conjunction with threat of hemiparasites. Okay, they took advantage of 10 years of data, plots across these two different forest types, and it so happened that halfway through this 10-year period, NTFP collection was banned, Also, approximately halfway through this period, some of these plots were invaded by lantana and mistletoe, so they were able to sort of build models for each of these different conditions and then simulate combinations of these different conditions. So very briefly, what they found, for those of you who are not familiar with think of that population growth rate, one in stable populations, anything less than that is declining population size, a growing population, and that's the two species of Amla that they were looking at. And what you find is that, what they found was that harvest, yes, was causing population declines, but not as much as mistletoe. They also found that lantana was causing population declines more so in the dry forest. There isn't that much lantana in the scrub forest. But interestingly, even in plots that didn't actually have lantana, in the lantana invaded forest, lantana seemed to be having an indirect effect, and that they saw that from very poor regeneration in these plots. So just to summarize, what they found, fruit harvest doesn't seem to be having much of an effect on populations, and they think that's because people are harvesting fruits only in years with good fruit crops. So on average, each tree gets harvested only once every 2 to 3 years. Mistletoe is having a much larger effect on population dynamics, presumably because it causes mortality of adults. And then lantana is having both direct and indirect effects on recruitment, and they think it's due to a higher grazing pressure in lantana invaded forests, even though there may not be lantana in the plots they studied. And this seems to be the case in neighboring forests also. People are starting to find this. So limiting fruit harvest alone, as was done by the ban on NTFP, is not likely to have positive effects on these populations. Okay, moving on to lantana and fire. This is a species that's probably familiar to a lot of people in this part of the world. It was brought to India more than 2 centuries ago as an ornamental and hedge plant, and it was planted across British cantonment towns across the country. Today it's widespread. In BRT, the earliest records of lantana go back to 1934. Lantana invades the understory and forms pretty dense thickets. In BRT, it can get up to 4 to 5 meters tall. That's a 2-meter scale in the foreground. It can also clamber up into tree canopies. And so when fires do occur, these act as ladder fuels, carrying fires up into the crowns. And this is a plantation. You can see the standing dead trees, but it's kind of illustrative of what we've observed in the BRT forest and nearby too. So the work I should also mention that the Forest Department blames people's use of fire for the spread of lantana, whereas the Soligas blame fire suppression for the spread of lantana. I'll come back to this. So the work I'm talking about here is work done by a former grad student at ATREE, Bharat Sundaram. He was the scale in the previous picture. He was able to take advantage of a survey of lantana across the 540 square kilometers of BRT in this 2x2 kilometer grid, and go back and repeat the survey 10 years later to look at changes in lantana distribution, and then relate that to various potential drivers of lantana spread. So this is what he found, in a pretty dramatic increase in lantana across the park over a 10-year period. So in 1997, it occurred only in 40% of the grids sampled. By 2007, it was in 80% of the grids. And it went from being 1 in every 20 stems to 1 in every 3 stems, so quite an increase. So looking at the factors that could be driving both lantana colonizing areas where it didn't occur previously, and also an increase in lantana densities where it did occur previously, This is the table on top is, you can think of it as weights of evidence in favor of each of these different predictors. And what he found was that if you look just at colonization, then grids where there was already lantana in adjoining grids, obviously, were most likely to be colonized by lantana. Whereas if you look at change in density, fire frequency seemed to be strongly related to change in density. But unlike what we expected to see, he found that there seems to be not a positive relationship between fire frequency and lantana density. If anything, a somewhat negative relationship. Certainly fire seems to be limiting lantana densities. And this is consistent with what the Soligas have been telling us all along, that fire prevents lantana rather than increases its spread. So in trying to reconcile what the department has been saying and our own observations of fire killing overstory trees and what the Soligas have been telling us about fire suppressing lantana, this is sort of in the nature of a hypothesis that following BRT being declared a protected area and strict policy of fire suppression, so prevention of the Taragu Benki, which was the Soliga fire management practice, may have resulted in this fire regime shift, if you like, from low lantana density forest where fire was keeping lantana at low densities to a high density lantana forest where fires, when they do occur, are destructive. This is something that we hope to test at some point. But what this brings us to is, just wrapping up the sections on Amla and fire, that mistletoe and to a lesser extent lantana are responsible for Amla decline, and although harvest is having an impact on Amlas, it isn't as much as the mistletoe. We need to pay attention to the history of Soliga fire management in these forests. Possibly fire prevention has helped the spread of lantana and perhaps also mistletoe, as the Soligas have been telling us. So at this point I'm going to hand it to Madegowda.
Thank you. Basically, so after ecological research, so I'm focusing on the counter mapping, how the people are living in the far landscape in the Biligiri Rangaswamy Temple Tiger Reserve. We have some alternative opportunity to work on this issue. This is the counter mapping. So the Soliga, the BRT Tiger Reserve, they are living for centuries. We have culturally, they worship nature, tree, stone, everything. And also we have our traditional songs called Guru Kana that also narrate about the forest. Like I can sing one line. Guru Guru Ka Guru Kana Guru Guru Ko Guru Kana Dodda Sampage Nannodeya Dodda Sampage Nannodeya Katu Kapadi Madagunaya Katu Kapadi Madagunaya Guru Guru Ko Guru Kana Guru Guru Ko Guru Kana. The Guru Guru Ka Guru Kana, this is the Soliga language, this is Kannada. In Guru means the sounds from the evergreen forest. If you went into the forest area, if you observe the sounds from the forest area, the bamboo sounds like a Guru. Kana means the evergreen forest in Kannada. So this is a Soliga. We have songs about the wildlife also, birds, animals, everything. We have songs about God, goddesses. And also we had a workshop with the communities, with the tribal community leaders. And we started how people are managing the landscape in the BRT landscape for centuries. Because they are living, the tribal communities are living the centuries. They know how to manage the forest area. But we need to understand their traditional knowledge, how they are conserving. So we started doing the mapping, and when we conduct the workshop, and most of the tribal leaders mentioned that we have worshipping sacred sites. So this is the god worshipped by the communities. This is a tiger god. People all worship tiger, elephant, wild boar, bear. All these are god to the tribal communities. This is a Michaelia champaka. This is a big tree. they worship by the Soligas in the Sun Tiger Reserve. So another this is goddesses we call Marama. So this is all in the first store formation we worship in the forest area. So this is called heroes, like a heroes of the forest area. They are all in the store formation. This is a god to the community. So yearly once they visit and worship. And this is the map we produce. We taken around 1.5 years to 3 years to map the entire mapping activities. There are 489 sacred sites were mapped. And we have around 85 informant involved in the process. We have used around 18 methodology to collecting this data. And this is the map we can see. Basically, we have among the Soliga community, we have 6 clans. Each clans having worshipping different 6 important sacred sites. Like a Viru is like a heroes of the forest area. And also we have Habbi is the water sources area, waterfall is worshipped by the community. They feel that goddesses will be taking bath or staying there in the places. Another thing that Devaru is a god that also in the store formation you can see. And also Marama is a goddesses, the worship by the community in that also in the store formation. And also we have Kallugudi, this ancestor temple. After death, we place the stone in the ancestor temple. That is a Kallugudi. Then we have Sagga or Samadhi called burial ground. These are the more sacred sites by Soligas. You can see the 489 sacred sites. And people also felt that because now people are getting the education, younger generation, and losing the traditional culture, there is a need to be documented. So this is another, all the 6 important sacred called LAs. So when we presenting the 489 sacred set to the community, and then they told that we have some more things also there, you have to add it. So then they told that we have LAs, each clans worshipping different goddesses or Viru, all these 6 important sites. So different clans having, so this is the LAs we people mentioned. And we had a discussion with the community leaders. So they told that we put all the map in the community leaders. They said that you have to do some more work. So finally, for the map activities, we took them to tribal elders to the top of the hill forest area. And we identify the LS based on the forest area. Which forest area belongs to which clan group. So this is the LS in the top of the hill. We sit together on the map. And this is about the LA. You can see there are 46 LAs, so belong to different clan groups. The different clans having different clan colors. You can see there are 6 clans like a Belluru, Silkuru, all these clan names. You can have different colors. Based on the, if you take each LAs have 6 important sacred sites. Like that we have entire 46 LAs having different goddesses. So this is the LA map we produced. So this is another important thing we did, that people know the forest depth. They know knowledge of the flora, everything. So when we doing this LA map, so people mention which forest area belong to which clan group. So they know which these are the forest areas. They mention the different names for each forest areas. So each clan group we have 50 to 60, 70 forest names. So different forest area from 1 kilometer to 2 kilometer away, there is a different forest names. So this is the map we produce with when we doing that. So more than 1,500, 1,600 names were collected. This is a big forest. Within that also we have smaller names. The stream there is a name, and the small forest also there is a name. So this is the map we produce. So ultimately we produce 2 maps. That is, one is Kannada and another is English map. Because community know the Kannada language, local language, so we produce the language. But in English also we produce. All the 6 clans and 46 LAs, all the 489 sacred sites you can see. And this map we are using for the getting the rights of the community. Not only documenting and documenting the culture and documenting the sacred site, but we also use for the getting the rights. This is evidence for the communities, and the younger generation can use this also. So when we having meeting with the tribal leaders, one of Madegowda mentioned that this official map makes us invisible to recognize the forest roads and bungalows, but we don't recognize the community sacred sites. So they feel that they need some map for the communities to show the government we are living the centuries in the forest area, we are conserving the forest area. So for the evidence, so we prepare the map and distributed within the community, and also we distributed to the government departments. So now I'm focusing on this another activities we carried out, like a Forest Right Act. This is you can see the already there's BRT Tiger Reserve. In the Tiger Reserve, series of changes is taken, policy is taken place. The community is affected in the policy taken place for the conservation purpose and protection, but the community, those living in the forest area, they face the problem. This is the BRT Tiger Reserve Wildlife Sanctuary, the reserve forest declared 1980s, and 1974 they declared into wildlife sanctuary. They put the staff in the community to do shifting cultivation, and some of the community people were shifted to outside the forest area for the relocation. So then communities are depending on the NTP non-timber forest product collection for around 60% income. So when banners came, people are to migrate outside, so they lose their livelihood from the forest. Then Tiger Reserve in 2011, the government of India declared the Tiger Reserve. So people asked to relocate from the forest area. In the BRT Tiger, we have around 61 settlements. Within that, 22 settlements are inside the core area. So after that, after the long time, with the struggle from the tribal community or indigenous community in India, the government of India brought the Forest Right Act in 2006, giving the rights to the community. Because millions of people are living the centuries in the forest area, they don't have any right over the land, and collection community rights also. So in this act, so there is two major component: the individual land rights, the rights to land cultivate whatever the land they cultivate community, they will get the rights. Second one is a forest resource, then forest management. So collection, forest resource, and management. Then we have individual land rights. People are we involved in this process, and 1,300 families received the individual land rights, and 800 families are waiting for the process. And also with our whole effort, we 25 settlement received the community forest resource rights in 2011 in Tiger Reserve. The rights like minor forest produce collection, NTP collection, and also fishing and grazing rights. People receive their protection, regeneration, and management of the conservation area. Then traditional knowledge rights. Then people worshipping rights, 489 sacred sites. This is the around out of 5 ranges, 3 ranges people are received the community CFR rights. And also we initiated with the Soliga communities, and we had the workshop with the community tribal leaders. We are around 200 people from different parts of the settlements and gather and are the workshop on the community-based tiger conservation. So we can involve the local community in the conservation, but involving the scientific communities, environmentalists, scientists, NGOs, and the tribal communities. And we prepare the community-based tiger conservation plan. So in the tiger conservation plan, we have the people feel that the forest department and committee should involve in the conservation, because the conservation we identify what are the threats to the forest area, how can we solve by traditional methods. The second one is livelihood aspect. So what are the livelihood opportunity to the communities? Then we have governance. So how can we manage the forest area, govern the forest area? These are the major things.
Okay, so where does all of this leave us? I think for us, what is emerging from all of this is that landscapes like the BRT have had a history of human presence and cultural attachment for a long time. And so in a context like this, to consider human use or management as purely detrimental to to these forests is an oversimplification of what is really quite a complex relationship. People's use or management is not external to the system, but has been part of this for a long time. And so rather than denying it or severing it, which can probably have consequences that are undesirable, what we really need to do is engage with this in a critical manner. And BRT is only one example of numerous such landscapes across the country, landscapes with history. What the Forest Rights Act does is to open up the legal space to engage with this kind of history of long human association. Of course, there are probably risks involved, challenges involved, but we think it's also an opportunity to empower communities, restore their rights and dignity, and make them partners in governing and conserving these landscapes. And for a country that's as diverse ecologically, historically, culturally as India is, we strongly feel that we need a plurality of approaches. The alternative, which is just exclusionary conservation, one size fits all, is probably not likely to serve either communities or conservation in the long term. So just to wrap up, a lot of different people have been involved in this work and fed into this work over the years. Thank you.